Welcome to So True. And our devotional today is entitled Good for Nothing, and it comes from Matthew 25, 24 to 30. D.L. Moody was to his generation what Billy Graham was to ours, a force for evangelism. He was untrained and uneducated, but he offered up his whole self to Christ, and God blessed his life and ministry, so much so that he rose to national and international prominence. And although he was untrained, he was the means of starting Moody Bible College in Chicago that continues to bless the church and the world to this day. Due to his lack of formal training and sophistication, Moody's words offended and some of his uncouth methods annoyed others. On one occasion, a school teacher approached him and said, "Mr. Moody, if I could not use the English language any better than you, I would not speak in public." Moody humbly replied, "Lady, I know I make many mistakes, but I'm doing the best I can with what I have. What are you doing for Jesus with what you have?" On another occasion, someone criticized Moody heavily for his unorthodox methods. Moody replied with a certain transparency, "I don't like them much myself. What methods do you use or recommend?" The critic replied, "He used none." Moody abruptly retorted, "Well, I think I like the way I do it better than the way you don't do it." Some people are good at doing nothing, aren't they? Other than criticizing those who are doing something. But we need to be more critical of those who do nothing. We need to remind ourselves that passivity can be as much an evil as active wrongdoing. We would do well to remember that sin comes in two forms. The first is the sin of commission, where we do what is wrong, what is forbidden, and what is unlawful. But the second is the sin of omission, where we do not do what is right, and we leave undone what we ought to have done. And the sin of omission is often something we omit. James says in James 4:17, remember, it is a sin to know what you ought to do and then not to do it. That's the New Living Translation. The seriousness of the sin of omission is outlined for us by Jesus in the parable of the talents taught in Matthew 25, verses 14 to 30. The servant who receives the 1 talent and must give an account to his master is found to have done nothing with that 1 talent, and his master blasts him and criticizes him. You can read about that in verses 24 to 30. In fact, in the text, verse 26 and 30, the master calls him wicked, lazy, and unprofitable. He holds nothing back in terms of his criticism. This man's sin was that of the buried talent, missed opportunities, paralysis of analysis, and underdeveloped possibilities. It was not good enough that he did nothing wrong. There was wrong in his doing nothing wrong. Here Jesus exposes a do-nothing kind of wickedness. According to this parable and the teachings of Christ, to fail to obey a good command is as bad as committing a forbidden evil. Both are disobedience to God. The absence of good deeds is as big as the absence of, as big a problem as the presence of evil deeds. To ignore God's positive commands is as much a sin as to violate his negative ones. The man in the parable was not grossly bad. He was simply good for nothing, which in Jesus' mind is grossly bad. And we need to hear that. We need to remind ourselves, it needs to be underscored, it is not enough to do nothing bad. It's not enough to not commit adultery. We must move on to actively seek to love our spouses. It's not enough to keep the faith. We must move on actively and seek to share it in evangelism. It's not enough not to forsake the assembling of ourselves together. We must actively and joyfully participate in the services we attend. It's not enough not to be drunk with wine. We must actively seek to be filled by the Spirit. Hopefully I've made that point. Hopefully you've heard the point made by Jesus in the criticism of the master toward the the man with the one talent. Don't be good for nothing.